Well, good evening and welcome to our live stream this Saturday, June 18th, 2022. So glad that you've connected with us. Sorry that we're having a little bit of issues here starting off, but glad that you're with us here as we wrap up our three-part series entitled Piecing the Puzzle Together. Thus far, we've looked at our place in the puzzle individually as a follower of Christ, as well as collectively as a community of faith. Each is to fit into God's kingdom purpose and redemptive plan. Through our discovery process, we found our piece of the puzzle to be loving people through life's experiences. You have your own mission, your own piece of the puzzle, as we do individually, but also collectively, whether it's a Bible study, a local church, or some other kind of a group. In this series, I've taken our mission statement that I've just shared with you and deconstructed it much like a culinary term. And so we've taken this and divided it into three elements. The first being loving people. Who is the church to love? Well, we know that we are to love the healthy and hurting followers of Christ, but also those in the world who are helpless and hopeless. The next element that we deconstructed was the word through. The byproduct of loving people is providing them with comfort as they journey through life and encounter various trials and pressures. We all have trials. We all have pressures in our world. Paul provided us through 1 Thessalonians 5:14 guidance as to how we take our own experiences and translate them into encouragement for others. Today, we consider the final element or the final deconstruction of this mission statement by focusing on these last two words, life's experiences. The principle of the puzzle is extremely simple, but putting the pieces together and thus revealing the picture. Every piece has a place, and each piece fits together with the other pieces. Once they are fixed together, the picture remains clear. However, break the pieces apart and you no longer see the picture. Now, that's exactly what our enemy, the devil, wants to do, to break the pieces apart, create factions, to create divisions in the puzzle. The task of the master puzzle builder is to keep the pieces together no matter the pressure or stress points that occur during the building process. That calls for the pieces to be connected together and for the pieces to be cooperative with each other in order for them to care for one another. This is to be the case whether there is trouble or when there is triumph, when the individual pieces are struggling or when they are sailing through life, or when a follower of Christ is hurting, or as we've mentioned before, while they are healthy. So let's turn this evening to 1 Corinthians 12:26. As I've mentioned previously, Corinth was a prominent Greek city that Paul evangelized and established during his second missionary journey. It was located on a major east-west trade route, making it a mecca for commerce and prosperity. The challenge for the Gentiles who were coming to Christ was to how to live in a materialistic and worldly culture and not only keep their faith alive, but represent Christ to those in their world. Very, very similar to our culture here in America. How do we live out our faith in a way that honors God, but then, of course, helps people around us? Well, here's what Paul writes to them, 1 Corinthians 12:26, in your own Bible app or in your favorite Bible version. He says, if one member suffers. Now, before we really dig into this verse, I want to address some of the misnomers about suffering, because in our world we seem to think suffering is when we are inconvenienced or when we simply don't get our way. But certainly in any type of difficulty or struggle, we say, oh, I'm suffering so much. Well, Peter wrote in 1 Peter 3:17, for it is better, if it is the will of God, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. Now, he wasn't talking, it should be apparent, about inconvenience, rather the consequences of living a life that is pleasing to God in a world that persecutes those who represent God. That's the essence of Jesus's words to his followers when he says, if they persecuted me, they certainly will persecute you. And so this idea of suffering is nothing to do with inconvenience or difficulty. It's the persecution that arises in a person's life because they've committed their life to represent Christ and to honor Christ in our world. So Paul, again, writes here in 1 Corinthians 12, if one member suffers, if is the condition, one individually, and a member suffers, if they are facing, the word suffer is the Greek word pasco, if they are experiencing any kind of struggle, any kind of pressure, any kind of a sensation, oftentimes painful, oftentimes not something that they're longing for. But if one member suffers, if they're experiencing something that is not good or edifying for them, then really every part of the puzzle, all the members suffer with it. Now, I want to hone just a little bit into this word suffer with, because you will see at the end of this, or the last half of this verse, where it says rejoice with. The suffering with, it's a compound word, and the commonality between suffer with and rejoice with is this idea that we are connected in this body of believers, or in this puzzle that we've been referencing as an illustration, that we are connected with one another, so that if one element of the puzzle or one element of the body of believers is impacted, then it impacts the entire puzzle or the entire body of Christ. Think of those times when you've had a cold or the flu. Your muscles ached, your energy level had dropped, you couldn't sleep very well, food didn't taste good, perhaps you had a difficult time concentrating. In other words, one aspect of your body was ailing, and it adversely affected other parts of your body. Or what about the person who had a bad day at work or school? You act grumpy on your way home, aren't very talkative, certainly aren't congenial to others, and when you're walking up the walkway to your front door, you see the neighbor's cat just lying there as if nothing in the world is bothering it. And so you choose what you would do with that cat. But one aspect of our life went awry, and so every other aspect of our life was impacted. And so Paul writes, while one member suffers, all of the members suffer with it. One part of the puzzle, one part of the body is negatively being impacted, so the whole body is impacted or being affected. So we look then, if one member, he continues, if one member is honored. And what that means, if that one element of our body, if one element of the puzzle is esteemed, then all join in. All are a part of that. We've all invested. We're all a part of the body of believers. And so when one part, one element of our group, of our church, of our fellowship is esteemed, then all of us share in that kind of cheerfulness, that jubilation. So most people are adept at reciprocating negative feelings. Someone is mad at you, and so you in turn are mad at them. A person irritates you, so you try to irritate them. But Paul is writing of a member of the body that does well, which means the whole body is happy. Those who recently participated in the spelling bee contest, when their mind figured out the word and their mouth spoke it or spelled it out, the whole body joined in the jubilation. It normally isn't difficult for any group to celebrate these grand moments of a person's life. Think of a wedding or the birth of a child, graduation, a promotion of some sort, special recognition within the community. However, in the community of faith, we don't celebrate enough of what I would refer to as the grace moments of a person's life. For example, do we actually celebrate an answer to prayer? Do we testify of God's goodness when a person comes through surgery? When people traveling the roads make it safely there and return home? If you'd announce in most churches that there would be a baby shower on the weekend or next week, most ladies would attend or plan on attending. There'd be cake, gifts, refreshments, maybe even some games, but announce to the same church group the next week there would be a party to celebrate the full recovery of someone who had just had surgery. And I dare say maybe a handful of people, maybe only a handful of people, if any, would come. Well, here's what Paul is saying. We all have shared experiences, celebrated milestones as we've progressed through life. Now, my definition of life experiences, those incidents in life that change and or challenge an individual. Such life experiences as starting or graduating school, normal stages associated with age development, family, death, divorce, whatever is occurring within the family, a loss, maybe a loss of job, maybe you've lost through a natural disaster your possessions, the celebration of a career or even retirement. And then how about even those shared life experiences where we have moments where we feel inadequate or insignificant? The mission statement declares that this community of faith is dedicated to loving people through life's experiences. We celebrate with people when they're progressing well in life. We cheer folks on or cheer them up when they are under pressure or struggling at the moment. But how do we comfort and encourage people in those circumstances? How do we come alongside of people in their time of suffering and really in their time of rejoicing? How do we love people through life's experiences and help in their recovery, their restoration, their reconciliation, their renewal? Well, I'm going to give you an acronym. Our mission statement says loving people through life's experiences. And I take the word life's, LIFES, create an acronym of practical ways in which we can help people through their life experiences. How do we do that? First, by leaning in and listening closely. By leaning in. You know, when you're in a crowd and there's a lot of things going on, someone's trying to get your attention and say something to you, you kind of lean in and you listen intently or you listen closely. This points to both your proximity to the person as well as your perspective toward the person and their predicament. It's amazing to me how many times we find someone and we push them aside because of their hurting and their struggling. But we realize, as Jesus stated on the Sermon on the Mount, that we should judge not lest we be judged. It's the principle of the speck and the log. Don't focus on the speck in one person's eyes while you have yourself a log in your eye. Listen closely then for what? We're to lean in and listen closely, but what are we listening for? Well, first of all and foremost, we're listening for God. He will instruct us as to when to speak and how or what to say. When to speak and what to say. And then second of all, listen closely to the heart of the individual as well as their hurt. So sometimes it's not so much what they say, but how they say it. What's their body language communicating? What's the tone in their voice? And that requires you to be quiet and to be attentive. And so James writes to those who had been persecuted in Jerusalem and had dispersed themselves throughout the world to listen much, to speak little, and not become angry. So how do we help people get through life's experiences? Well, first by leaning in and listening closely. That's the L. And then secondly, by introducing any edifying insights with respect and humility. Now, your pride or self-righteousness is a hard pill for people to swallow. Your aim is to restore, assist in reconciliation, and aid in bringing about spiritual renewal. It isn't about finding fault and making someone feel bad about their choices or their circumstances. And so Paul wrote in Galatians 6:1 that we are to bear each other's burdens. If a man is overtaken in any trespass, we are to restore him in the spirit of gentleness. So where do you derive these insights? If we're going to introduce edifying insights, where do we find these? Well, from your own experiences. A positive transforming experience to share with someone stems from either a developmental or a detrimental incident that stimulated your spiritual growth and character development. So here's the idea. Whatever you share with someone as an insight should boost the other person. However, it should also boast about God's love and grace. When people give testimonies, have you noticed how many times they share how bad their life was as if that's the point of their testimony? The reality is, yes, we've all sinned. We all have those matters in our past that we wish we hadn't experienced, but how we got through them is a testimony of God's grace and love. And so whatever insights we're sharing with people, it should boost them in their spiritual recovery and reconciliation and renewal, but it also should boast of God's love and grace. So Peter says to us that honor Christ and let him be the Lord of your life. Let him get all of the glory, because really it is all about Christ and what Jesus has done for us. Great things God has done. Thirdly, or in the letter F, L-I-F, by fortifying their faith in God. How do we enable or how do we help people get through their own life's experiences? Well, by fortifying their faith in God. Paul writes in Ephesians 3:20 and says, with God's power working in us, God can do much. It's God's power, and it's our faith in God. It's not our ability. Rather, it's all about having faith in God, tapping into him. And so God's power working in us, we're connected to him, just like you would need to be connected through a cord into a electrical socket in order for electricity to flow and light up a light or make some kind of a kitchen apparatus work. So this isn't a self-serving faith, rather what I would refer to as a surrendered faith. It means we've surrendered our will, our way, and even our when, W-H-E-N, to God. Do that and you will have the faith of a mustard seed, which Jesus said in Matthew 17 in response to, well, why couldn't we do this marvelous work of grace like you have? And he says, because of the littleness of your faith. How do you attain that kind of faith? By believing beyond belief. How do you get this mountain moving faith? It's by believing beyond belief. It's not what we would think as reasonable and achievable. That's not faith. But faith that Jesus is speaking about in God is what he can accomplish, that which is unfathomable to us and incredible to us. God is able, and that faith in him, for him to do what we cannot do within our own means, is what faith is all about. It's that mountain moving faith. So I ask you tonight, have you moved any mountains lately? Well, we're talking about how we can help people through life's experiences by listening, by providing insights, by certainly fortifying their faith in God, and then next by extending encouragement and empathy. Empathy is understanding someone and their situation with sympathy and compassion. It would be the opposite if you know the story of Job in the Old Testament. The three friends that came to Job after all of the downfall of things, moving and destroying and all of this that took place, and they tried to say, well, Job, what did you do? And so it's the opposite of what Job received from his three friends. Again, you turn to Peter, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. And he says, finally, all of you should be of one mind, full of sympathy toward each other. How much sympathy do you have in your group, whether it's a small group or if it's some kind of a Bible study, maybe even a fellowship, or within your own church? How much sympathy is there? We find most often in the Christian community that we are more judgmental than we are sympathetic. And yet we've all been through these life experiences. And so Peter simply says, all of us should be of one mind. We've all been through these situations. So we should be full of sympathy towards others, loving one another with tender hearts and humble minds. So this isn't about coddling or cocooning, where you take somebody and you just make sure that they never have anything adversely happen in their lives. Trials are good for us because it deepens our faith and it develops our character. And so we need to go through these trials. James wrote about this in James chapter 1. You can't protect a person, and we shouldn't even try to protect a person from all of the challenges they will face. You have a baby who begins to walk, and yes, we push back anything that has a sharp edge, but you allow them to fall to get back up. That's how they strengthen their muscles. That's how they work out this balance in their minds, muscle memory. And so when it comes to our fellow followers of Christ, we need to extend to them encouragement and empathy. Life isn't about how many times you fall, rather how many times you get up. For those who have that I won't quit kind of an attitude, there's been somebody in your life who truly cared and saw your potential and kind of stood in your corner and encouraged you to keep on going. For those you are loving through life's experience, that encouragement will need to be extended to them on a daily basis. And that's a part of what the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 3, verse 13, encourage one another daily, so long as it is called today. So every day we need to kind of extend a good word, a word of encouragement, a word of empathy, but to be a help to each and every person that we run into through the course of the day. LIFE, the last part of the acronym is S, and it is, how do we help people through life's experiences by staying steadfast, connected, and supportive. Truly helping others is exhausting. And let's not forget that element, but it is also exhilarating. Don't be a fair weather advocate or a self-serving supporter. In Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24, there are friends who pretend to be friends. We all have those fair weather, pretend to be friends in our lives. But the wisdom literature tells us that there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Be an ally or an advocate and an applauder. So not only an ally and an advocate, someone who intercedes for those people, but be an applauder till they reach the point of recovery or restoration, reconciliation, or renewal. The picture the completed puzzle provides is of God's people connected to one another, working in cooperation with each other in order to care for one another without distinction or judgment. Every person around you is under some kind of worldly pressure. I mean, aren't you under some kind of worldly pressure? You're not unique. Everyone around you is facing some kind of a challenge. So here's the question, though. Are you helping them to get through, or are you a hindrance to them getting through? You must make a conscious decision to engage those around you. Then you must make a committed effort to lift them up, love them back to being well, and let them go on to serve God. So are you a piece of the puzzle? If so, you bear a responsibility to connect, cooperate, and care for others, to love people through life's experience. Whether, as Paul writes here in our verse today, whether that piece is going through suffering or whether it's a time of rejoicing. We all have these seasons where things just seem to be going better than ever. And then we have those times when it's really a struggle, really a difficult time. I don't know what your season is, but if I was there, I would certainly encourage you to keep going. Because once you have won the victory, then you have the ability to help others facing similar challenges to make it through. It's what we receive, what we gain, what we have that we then are able to share and to give to others. We're a team. We're a family. We're a puzzle connected with one another. My prayer, my hope for you is that you will have someone coming alongside of you to help you in your times of need, but that in turn you will come alongside others in their time of need. I hope you've been able to enjoy and digest this series. We'll be back together the weekend of July 3rd, 2nd and 3rd, leading into July 4th. And we'll be sharing our annual Wake Up America message. Look forward to being with you then, July 2nd. And until then, may God's love and grace surround you and bless you and keep you safe. Amen.